In this video, I'm going to be asking why has the Russian military so underperformed in this campaign in Ukraine? And as you can tell from my hair, I'm definitely not a military person, never have been. So there are a number of reasons, and in no particular order. Well, logistics seems to be the obvious one because it's something which is so rudimentary, but they haven't got that right. So this has always been a headache for them. I mean, the Russian military and the Soviet military before it has often been slow. If you look back to the Second World War, it took the Germans, I think it's 4.5 months to get from the Polish border to the gates of Moscow. It took the Soviets 2.5 years to go back that same distance. Admittedly, the Germans had the element of surprise. Other things, yeah, and then just not doing the basics, not keeping vehicles in a decent state, so they weren't in a roadworthy condition, breaking down a lot. Corruption. It's not as bad as it was in the 90s, where they're selling off not just fuel on the black market, but vehicles, even weapons. But this time maybe fuel a little bit. So they say, fish rots from the head down, and some of the senior generals taking bribes or selling off things. I think not on a gross scale, so perhaps that can be exaggerated. A lot of evidence is anecdotal about when they were stationed in Belarus, some of the Russian troops illegally selling their fuel. What if it was one of them? Out of 200,000 people who attacked, that wouldn't have been remotely significant, but it might have been more than that. I mean, I can't quantify it. And then obviously just the commander-in-chief, Putin, making some very rash decisions, attacking the wrong time. When the thaw it comes and when it gets muddy, that's no secret. It's roughly the same time every year, and he went ahead despite that. So they were too cocksure. They were overconfident, thinking the Ukrainians fold very, very quickly, so that wouldn't really matter. They could simply drive down the road. It would be a walkover. Well, they're dead wrong about that one. Being too sure of themselves was obviously a big mistake. And obviously the Ukrainians have put up much more of a fight than had been anticipated. So there's been this groupthink, and I know the Russians are not alone in this, but in a society where people are discouraged to think for themselves, where dissent is really stamped upon hard, this is going to be a lot worse. Even in free societies, there's an element of groupthink, there's wishful thinking, but there's an over-optimism is really there in Russia, which is so militaristic, which is always singing the glories of its military, and diminishing the glory of the military is a crime in Russia, and so forth. And we won before, so we'll win again, a sort of thing, deluding themselves into believing that a large segment of the Ukrainian population would welcome them open arms, when there's been virtually none of that, because they succeeded very easily in Crimea, had some success in Luhansk and Donbass. They thought this was going to be the same thing, but that was a totally different scale. Crimea is not even 5% of the Ukrainian landmass, and the population was highly sympathetic to Russia when Russia staged that referendum there. 97% of people, according to the Russian referendum, voted they want to be part of Russia. Okay, Moscow would have cheated a lot, but even if they'd held it on a very fair basis, it would have been about like 77%. I think that Putin is going to do a Grozny on Kiev, which is to say just bomb it to bits. He'll just reduce the city to rubble, because rather than fighting house to house, it costs a lot of casualties, surround them, and it's a slow but sure victory. They'll just demolish every single building. That's going to take weeks, so a lot of people will be killed. And if they're not killed in the bombardment, they're going to run out of food, water, everything else. But, the sanctions are going to go on. Even if Putin gets his victory, even if he conquers the whole of Ukraine, these sanctions are going to be there for years. I mean, the only way to get sanctions lifted is to do the one thing he doesn't appear to contemplate, which is to immediately unconditionally withdraw. But even if there's some sort of compromise, he would obviously want sanctions lifted as part of that, and I don't think he's going to get it, because obviously NATO countries want to see the diminution of Russia as an economy permanently, making it much more difficult to afford such a big military. The plan was misconceived. Is it that they've attacked on too many lines? They could have launched some feints, but they haven't. They attacked from 3 directions, could be good for them. They could say, Kiev is the prize, go all out for Kiev, forget about everything else. And there's some other alternative routes they could have come onto Kiev. No, but they invested several cities. Maybe that's a mistake, to spread the effort, not concentrate on one city at a time. And maybe if Kiev fell first, they would think that the others will fall like ninepins. They would just give up the ghost. It's just pointless. But perhaps not. Only one significant city, Kherson, has fallen to them. They still haven't taken Kharkiv. Is it 18 days into the war? That's only 20 miles from the Russian border. So pretty pathetic performance. If they mobilise all their reserves, they'd have 3.5 million troops. Now, admittedly, they couldn't put all of those into Ukraine because they've got to guard other frontiers. It's the vastest landmass in the world, the Russian Federation. And they just wouldn't have the logistics to move so many troops to supply them. So resupplies being a problem, running out of fuel and ammunition and stuff like that. The Ukraine is blowing up bridges. The Ukraine is, obviously well armed, highly motivated, which Putin hadn't reckoned with. So that's why he's arrested two of the most senior officers in the FSB while they're under house arrest, probably for getting it so badly wrong. Or there's a suspicion they spoke to Western journalists. Is that why they're in big trouble? I mean, they haven't been charged with something, but the conviction rate is over 99% in Russia. So these are some of the reasons why it's gone so badly wrong for the Russian army there. Their equipment is second rate, so I'm told. It's actually at the relative cheaper end of the price, cheaper end of the price range. I mean, it's not terrible, it functions, but it's certainly not outstanding. So maybe that's a problem as well. And they just heavily concentrate on firepower. You've got to get the artillery up, which means it's slow. They've not used their air force very much, maybe because the Ukrainian air defense is still intact. It's much stronger than they'd seen. He doesn't want to risk his precious air force. So his victory is not coming quickly. He's saying on schedule because it's not, and then saying that they're calling in mercenaries from the Middle East, from Syria and so on, which shows that obviously it's quite costly for them, and they want to reduce the number of Russian troops who are killed doing this, and maybe put the fear of the Lord into the Ukrainians, say, oh my goodness, these Ishmaelites will be even more barbaric than Putin's legions. Also sending in Chechens who are Russian citizens but not ethnically Russian, because the Russian army, I'm sorry to say, has a well-deserved reputation for brutality, but the Chechens are particularly notorious for sadism. Not being racist, not saying that all Chechens are like that, but certainly Ramazan Kadyrov's merry mob are horrific, are absolutely frightful, even to Chechens, his own ethnic group. So those are some of the reasons why the war has progressed badly for Russia, which is not to say they won't win in the end. I think they will. I think they will just gradually strangle Ukraine. And I've wondered aloud, should they throw in the towel now? Exactly. I mean, Russia's military equipment is inferior to NATO in just about every regard. It's a lot cheaper. So for their military budget, they get a lot more bang for their buck. Plus, they pay them so little. About 30% of their army are conscripts, and they do 1 year military service. It takes a few months, I'm told, just to learn the rudiments of soldiering. The trouble is, just by the time they're decent soldiers, they leave. So some poorly officered, disaffected conscripts there who surrendered very easily, who were lied to about their mission, which obviously destroyed their confidence in their leaders. They were told, when they were told it was actually an invasion, they were told it was going to be very easy indeed. So they were shocked and stunned when actually they met obstinate resistance. So these are some of the reasons why it's gone so badly for them. Not allowing initiative, rigidly adhering to the timetable. If stage 1 doesn't succeed, going ahead with stage 2 anyway, even when they don't get supply. No, I mean, I heard it's only 30% of them are draftees, actually. They're abysmally paid. They're paid $300 a year. No wonder they're selling off their fuel. But those, if you do 1 year successfully and want to stay on, you're paid rather more. They're paid something like $4,000 a year, which is a very decent salary in Russia. And obviously, there are not many good NCOs as a problem. The officers have to do a lot of the tasks that NCOs would do in a Western army. So thank you for watching my video. So please donate to me on PayPal. I really appreciate that. You can find me on PayPal with georgecallahan79@gmail.com. That's GeorgeCallahan79@gmail.com. Toodaloo, everyone.